Thanks for having the guts and the balls to be here today to talk about death. Yay! Are y'all ready to get awkward?
Yeah!
Kind of?
All right, so, my talk today is the life-affirming approach to death. Who doesn't want to make death a little happier? Right?
I do.
All right, who wants to make it a little bit less painful?
Yeah.
I think everybody should be raising their hands, right? Who likes pain? No.
What card is it on?
So I'd like to start off by saying I'm going to be basically, I'm going to kind of have us travel through the idea of death, what it means to us, what it meant to Ayn Rand, what it means to grieve, what it means to lose a loved one, what it means to even possibly plan our own death, what that would look like, and how maybe we would be able to make it easier for our loved ones to handle our demise. And so let me start with this. I'm going to be handing out some books. I'm just going to be kind of like passing it around. Just go ahead and pass it to your neighbor when you're done looking. I've got several. But I guess I don't want to necessarily have you read everything that I pass you. But just take a look at it. Kind of consider it. Write it down if you want, if you're interested in reading it later on, or you could even borrow it from me if you like. First one I'm going to do, this is actually from a funeral home. This was sent to me unsolicited because they thought I needed some help, after my dad died in May, and it was actually really nice of them. There's some good quote here. Yeah. So learn about death can improve the quality of your life. All of us will anguish over death at some point in our lives. And we need to have all of this stuff that we're learning today hopefully work for us. We suffer from ignorance, fear, and misconceptions about death. Most of us have not considered how our own deaths might affect the lives of those we love. We have difficulty contemplating our own mortality. Most of us here do not believe, or maybe all of us don't believe in the afterlife. We're all pretty secular in that way. So I think that for us as a group at GLOCon here, it's pretty a unique kind of thing because we don't want to be hearing from other people telling us that our loved ones are in a better place. Unless they want to be punched in the face. But contemplating our own death, contemplating who we are as human beings, contemplating the fact that we are not immortal, and contemplating the idea of perhaps leaving something for people to think about after we're gone. For instance, Ayn Rand wrote all of these awesome books. So we're always talking about her, so her memory isn't going to die. We keep her alive. So, just a little bit about me here. I change my hair color all the time, just so you know. So this is me about 8 years ago. On the right-hand side, that's my mom. Her name's Gloria Walker. She passed away about I don't know, just a little bit after this, probably about 9 months after that. And I took care of all of her things afterwards. I didn't have to go through a lot because it was just her bank account. But I kind of picked up the pieces after she passed away, and I also arranged her funeral, or celebration of life as we call it. This is my dad. This was probably about maybe 7 years ago. And he just, like I said, recently passed away. And I'm handling his estate and going through a lot of paperwork. And that's one of the things I'll be talking about, hopefully imparting some fun knowledge onto you all about how to go through probate, what to do to avoid it if you can for your loved ones after you're gone. So,
Putting the fun in funeral.
did you know that was the next slide?
hearts.
You have some kind of connection to the beyond, to the spirits.
Amy and I
sure.
seem to have something in common.
So here's the first book I'm passing around here. All right, so Ayn Rand, how did she feel about death? Well, in 1974, she had an interview with James Day. You can find this on YouTube. And by the way, that's her and her cat Frisco. I just thought it was too adorable not to put in there. So, you know, it wasn't concerning to her. But she did acknowledge the fact that the worst thing about death was the tragedy of losing a loved one, as we all know. But, you know what? She's not going to worry about death. She's living here and now. She's just not going to think about herself dying. And let me tell you this. I'm not here to be prescriptive or to give you normative values or tell you what you should do. I'm here to give you suggestions that you might consider in terms of thinking about your own death. Thinking about and because you're thinking about your death, of course you're thinking about planning your life. And planning your death, I'm hoping to possibly have you consider also is a part of planning your life, is planning your death. Here's another one. So, Tom Snyder is a real kind of hippy-dippy guy. He's like, I kind of think of this whole thing as I'm going, that there is an eternity, and that we are going to be part of that eternity. And we aren't just corpses and graves. And then she said, I love this little look that she gives him. We aren't corpses and graves. Well, we kind of are, but we aren't actually. We are actually there. We are not, you know, our corpses, obviously, what used to be us, we will all turn into corpses at some time. So sorry to say. Hate to say that, but bad news. But you know, I'm sorry?
Spoiler alert.
Yes. But, you know, as she said to him, you know, you're not there to say, oh, how terrible it is that I'm dead, how terrible it is that they're putting me in the ground. You know, you're just not there. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to go through that terror. And when you think about death, you don't really have to think about, you know, the kind of terrifying idea of, I'm just not going to be here anymore. I'm not going to be moving or thinking or doing or acting or anything like that. I'm just not going to be here. So it's a difficult concept. But you're just finished. So she says this, and I want to kind of open up to you guys here for a second. She says this, I will not die, it's the world that will end.
I love that.
Can anybody elaborate on that for me? Does anybody know what she's talking about?
For me, the world will end. She's talking about from her point of view.
Yeah.
There's no other point of view. That's who you are.
That's
so the
true.
world ends for you.
Yeah,
It's just so beautiful.
yeah, yes. Yes, that's a good, yep.
You know, Harry Binswanger once told me, he said, I can't imagine the world without me.
I can imagine him saying that. So,
The world's gonna be gone.
so all this time that I've been putting this stuff together, I have been digging into all sorts of different books, all sorts of different perspectives from a lot of people in the funeral business, the mortuary sciences, and does anybody know here, does anybody have any friends or family who are in the funeral and mortuary business? Just a few. Cool. Yeah, well, I've been learning these people's, I think you were involved in estate planning yourself. So that's great. Not a lot of people know this stuff. Nobody knows what goes on behind the closed doors of a funeral home. Nobody knows what happens to a body when it's being embalmed. Nobody knows. Yet we trust these wonderful people in suits who come out and say, "Oh, we're very so sorry for your loss, and what would you like to have your uncle wear, you know, and what kind of casket And a lot of this stuff comes out of this whole practice comes out of the fact that we as Americans lived through terrible wars, such as the Civil War and World War I especially, and people they lost we lost so many people, and it was so horrible and tragic, and they wanted to figure out a way, especially in the Civil War, to make their remains last a little longer, so it could travel great distances, so it could go back to their family, and it could still be recognized as their son, or their father, or their uncle. So that is where embalming comes in. Embalming is not something that is it's not 1,000 years old. It's maybe 200 years old, maybe. So I've been reading these things, like Confessions of a Funeral Director. This is Caleb Wild. He's a 6th generation funeral service provider and mortician. And so you take a look at that. I highly recommend you guys looking into these folks later on YouTube, in books. They're everywhere. They're out there, including my favorite, Caitlin Doty. Anybody heard of her? Anybody heard of Ask a Mortician on YouTube?
Yeah.
My favorite channel. She is hilarious, and she really does put some at least a little fun in funeral. And she's just very entertaining to watch, and she approaches these issues with a lot of levity, a lot of needed levity, some gallows humor, as we discovered what that meant yesterday. And I highly recommend listening to her audiobooks because she does read them herself. She was the one who came up with the term death positive. Yay, death! So she came out with this in 2013. She's like, why are all these references sex positive? Why not death positive? And of course, she was being a little facetious there, and she will say it's not about hoping for death, or giving that giving that some applause or something like that. The idea here is that she believes that the culture of silence surrounding death should be broken and should be talked about more. Here we are, as we're all philosophers, we're objectivists. We love our philosophy. We love the deeper questions. We love to peel back those onion skins. Yet, there is one topic a lot of people in America don't talk about. So, I'm just suggesting things here. I don't want to be prescriptive, but we have another book. This is a really excellent thing. I'm actually going to be filling this out for myself and probably getting one for Robert because it's extraordinarily valuable. If you really want to, and this is what I'm thinking, that when I'm gone, I don't want anybody to have to, while they're grieving, because I'm sure I'll be missed and people will wail for days. I expect this, okay, everybody? I'll be looking. No, I won't be doing it. But this is exciting for me because this, basically it's a planner. Important information about my belongings, business affairs, and wishes. What are my passwords on my computer? It'll be in here. How do I want to, what do I want my remains to go? Do I want to be cremated? Do I want to be buried? Do I want to have a green funeral? Do I want to be sprouted? Do I want a tree to sprout for me? Whatever. Do I want to be made into a little gemstone on a ring? So beautiful, what we're going to be talking about now is what we can do now. And I know that we're all pretty young around here, but if you do this planning now, it will not increase the rate of your death. It will not call death upon you all of a sudden because you're doing this. So take a look at that. There you go. So the question now is, finding someone you trust. You know, for me, it's going to be Robert, and Robert's going to be me. But who knows? We may die in a freak bungee jumping accident sometime together.
As one
And,
does.
you know, as one does. And we're going to have to ask somebody else to handle our affairs for us. But what I would like to do is make it so they don't have to do so much. So basically what we're going to be doing here is, this is in the context of, say, for instance, if you're in a coma, you can't think for yourself, you're hooked up to tubes. What do you want? And I know it's a horrible idea, you hate thinking about it, but what if, you know? So find someone you can trust to become your healthcare advocate if you are in that situation. So, for instance, if I was in a coma and there was no brain activity going on, I wouldn't want to be hooked up to life support. And those are the questions that you should certainly fill out now. Here's a do not resuscitate order, a nice little one-page thing with a little explanation that you can put together and give to your doctor. Here is, this is for Michigan, and by the way, each state has a different kind of thing going on, so you have to look that up. This is the Advanced Directives and Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare. Okay. It's also called a living will, or advanced directive. And so all these things have different names to them, and they're just such legalese. It drives me insane. And all the lawyers want you to go to them for their help and throw money at them for this.
Even though you can download most of these and handle it all yourself.
I just downloaded this the other night, so easy. So take a look at that. And this is the durable power of attorney for finances. So if I'm in a coma, somebody will be able to handle my finances.
And I can spend all of Amy's money.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I was doing that already.
So this is what you do, because I think, and going into this, guys, I had a real problem with what kind of paperwork do you fill out before you're dead? And then what happens after you die? Totally different world. And so again, this the DNR and the patient, the advanced directive, those can be rescinded anytime. You can change who your healthcare advocate is anytime. It's not too difficult to change these up. If you really want to be stuck on tubes in a coma for 5 years, and that's your wish, you can change that. So that's the easy part. But it's going to make it so much easier for your family and friends to figure out what you want, because you will have you have a voice, even though you don't physically have one currently. So yeah. Any questions on this so far? Okay, so
So even if you do want to be kept alive in the coma, you should still fill one out.
yes,
So that everyone's
yes.
clear about that.
Because if you don't have one, Uncle Bob, and if he's your next of kin, he's going to be able to make those decisions for you. And if he wants to pull the plug or keep you on, it's up to him. It's up to your family if you don't have this filled out.
Or if he just doesn't know any better, he's like, well, I would want to be pulled right away.
Yeah.
Some states you want to watch out. Your significant other, if you're not married, may not have any standing.
Yeah.
And you might want to make a point of it, so your Uncle Bob isn't the person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, say, okay, all of a sudden, woohoo, I have a terrible illness. Terrible. And I've known a lot of friends who died from cancer. My mom went through breast cancer, didn't die from it, but so I know what this is like, and I've dealt with help, specifically a friend of ours. They a former objectivist, Dave Feller, who had salivary gland cancer. And, yeah, so, and he didn't have any family, so we helped him out. So we did these things like help him figure out home hospice. He died at home, and so that's exactly what he wanted. We made sure we knew all his wishes and we carried them out. He helped us plan his funeral. He helped pick out his casket. And he was the most gracious and loving and wonderful person about this that you could even dream of. He was just the best. And he made it easy for us to help him.
Relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking. He had his quirks, but I loved him. So the other thing here is, who has ever heard of a death midwife or doula? Anybody? No. Okay. Two people, maybe three? Okay, great. Because this is the new revolutionary way to deal with terminal illness and death planning and making it easier on your family. You can hire a death doula or death midwife, usually a woman, or always it's basically a woman. They can be a volunteer, but if you want them to be there for you and your family for quite a long, even months, they can help you with all the estate planning, they can help you with all of this stuff, all the paperwork, but they can be there to coordinate at the time of your death. They can be the ones who call up, Uncle Bob from Illinois, so that he can come out and see you before you go, if that's your wish. They can actually handle a lot of these logistics, which is amazing. And I highly recommend you guys look this up, because it's so, the stories that I've read about people with cancers or however, having a death doula or a death midwife, it basically makes it so much easier for them to cope and their family to cope. And that's, who doesn't want to mitigate suffering, right? Am I right? So anyway, take a look. You can also write letters or make videos for your loved ones to be opened upon your death. Who's ever seen the show Afterlife with Ricky Gervais? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
very good.
I recommend that as well. It's very good. And quite comical. So, other little known facts. Let me just take a look at my, oh good. Does anybody know if you have a right to your loved one's body after the police or the funeral home take it away? Do you?
Probably not.
You do! You have the right to your loved one's body. If the police officer or funeral home is telling you, we need to take your Aunt Sally out right away because, it's somehow unsanitary or dangerous to have a dead body in your house or in her house. And it's dangerous to be around a dead body after they die. Totally false, entirely wrong, total lie, unless they have Ebola, or an infectious disease, something like that. You can spend as much time with your loved one. And this is it's a freaky kind of concept, because who has, like for me, I have been there for two people when they passed away. But even then, I didn't feel like I needed to, or I didn't think I had the option, actually, to stick around for a few hours and talk to them while they are now gone. And to kind of get myself to psychologically process that they are gone. That is something I didn't know was possible or was even open to me. And I kind of wish I had done that with my mom and with my dad. But now I know, now I do. So you could even have a home, if you want to plan this, you can have a home wake without embalming even. As long as you're okay with that. You can take your dead loved one, you can wash them yourself. You don't even need a funeral home. You don't. And especially if they're just going to go in for cremation or however, afterwards. So a lot of it sounds very morbid and creepy, and you have to have a tremendous amount of courage to do it. But I'll tell you, a lot of people do this, and I didn't know this, and now you do.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I assume if there's any kind of like suspicious circumstances or whatever,
Yes,
then the police
the
do have
police
the right
will,
to.
and the coroner will, and all of that stuff, and they will figure out why they died. But if it's something where it's a hospice situation, or if you have a deaf midwife or whatever, and they know it's a terminal illness, obviously. If there are bullet casings below Aunt Sally, yeah. Figure out if
We're gonna
somebody's
deal with this at home.
Okay. So anyway, just some FYI for you, just in case anybody, unfortunately, I hope that we're all healthy here and no one has to go through that, but just in case you do, there are ideas and options that I certainly didn't know about until recently. Next we go into my very favorite, this is actually, what's worse than death? Anybody?
Eating?
What is it? It's probate. Right, probate. Terrible.
There's a reason it sounds like prostate.
My uncle died of probate
This
cancer.
is a lovely, beautiful chart. This is actually for Florida probate. It's actually pretty much similar to Michigan. But it's crazy. And you just got to shell out money to that court. And you have to fill out this paperwork. And then you're like, what paperwork do I need to fill out? Then you're like, you call a lawyer, and they're like, yeah, it's going to be about $500 to $1,000. And you're like, no, I will. So this is me, by the way. Here, let me go back to this. This is how I did probate. I grasped in the dark, and it's not going to end anytime soon. And it was just the worst thing ever, because I decided not to pay a lawyer. My dad's estate was about $5,000, so it was a small estate. He didn't have a house or a car or anything like that, so that made it easy. So I thought, I'm like, this will be easy. He just has a bank account. Nope. It was really terribly difficult at a time that I was going through a lot. Huh? Yes. That's how it ends there, when I start cussing wildly. So basically, you go back to this awesome chart here. Hi. Hello. Oops. Hold on a second. Oh, PowerPoint just decided to vanish. Okay. Interesting. Close.
Who's that good-looking couple, Amy?
This is me and Robert
Oh,
several
that is-
years ago at a wedding vow renewal, which was lovely.
It was yours, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were officiating somebody. I don't know. Yeah, so, all right. So going back to this here, oh man, okay. Someone dies. My dad didn't have a will, but even if one existed, you still have to go through probate. You think you have a will, you're like, there's a way, because I've got a will. And then your loved ones realize, oh, wait a minute, I still need to contact a lawyer, I still need to pay all these fees out of my pocket, I still need to do, go through probate, fill out all these forms. It's just crazy. And so you go to the court, you've got to go to your other siblings if you have any and say, here's a form, I'm going to be doing this as an executor or a personal representative, and then you've got to identify your loved one's assets. What assets did they have before they died? What assets are there going to be coming up? Is there going to be a deposit for their apartment coming up? It's just all this crazy stuff that you do not want to be thinking about while you're grieving, while you're trying to remember the happy times that you had with your loved one. You don't want this. So I'm just going to skip now. So, yeah, and this whole thing was just absolutely nuts. And it's not going to end after I get his taxes done for next year. Maybe it'll end then. And I don't even know what I'm gonna do next, because I gotta call other people. Thankfully, by the way, I wanna give a shout out to Echo Garney, who isn't here today, and also my friend Laura Chapman, who used to work in a probate office, and I was just peppering them with questions and trying to understand all of this. So, how do you avoid all this stuff? Anybody have a living trust? A living trust, anybody? And now, I just want to give you a little second here. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a psychologist. Research all this for yourself. Don't take my word for it. But you could set up a living trust and have your loved ones go completely over probate. They don't have to deal with it. It's just going to be allocating the assets afterwards. I know you guys look so enthused right now. You should see your faces. I don't want to bore you or make you fall asleep here. And I'll send this out to you so you can look into this at your leisure when you find you just have nothing else to do. So you can set up all these beneficiaries for all of these different assets. So when you die, all of these things will just go their way to whoever you want to give these assets to. And so hopefully that's my goal, to have a living will. It's going to cost me probably $1,000 to $2,000 up front. But you know what? If your executor after you die, they end up having to pay out all sorts of money. So why don't you just do it now?
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to say something.
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
So, I'm an attorney, and I don't know I just think everyone has their own individual situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you go to a lawyer that doesn't know what they're doing, it can be expensive, but you can also, what the probate process is like in each state varies widely. Some states like New York, Florida, California, it's horrible and it's very expensive. Texas too is terrible, but check your state where you live to see what it's like.
Yeah.
Some people need to have the trust. Some people, some people, by the nature of their assets, maybe you own more than a bank account. Maybe you have a complicated, maybe you have lots of assets. There are tax consequences of all of this. And so if you go to an attorney that specializes in the area of estate planning, I think that just determining whether you need a will-based estate plan or a trust-based estate plan it will really help you in the long run. And this is really all about also how you have your assets titled, so that even if you have a will, but you don't have your assets titled properly, your IRAs, bank accounts, all these different kinds of things, it will make a tremendous difference in how the ease of the transfer of assets occurs upon death. If you have a mother that is getting Medicaid, paying for their nursing home care, that's like another whole situation. And so I know that there are unscrupulous attorneys everywhere, like there are unscrupulous people doing all kinds of things.
Not to imply that they,
But, I think sometimes thinking that, just this mantra that's been out there, I think that Susie Orvis started this, that like probate is evil. It's just a gross oversimplification.
Yeah.
And this is all about making things easy, not for you, but for your family members. And sometimes people always die in the wrong order. Sometimes people will think, oh yeah, well, Uncle Joe, or the wife is going to die last. That doesn't happen. And then there isn't a plan in place. If you have small children, you want to know who the guardians are going to be in the event you and your husband die. It's just a very complicated,
it is complicated
situation.
And yes, if you do have a larger estate, if you have a complex estate, go to the lawyer. absolutely. You know, spend an hour with them, pay the whatever it is, and figure this out.
And it's usually
Yeah.
done on a flat fee basis, unlike a divorce or something like that, so that you really know upfront what the cost is going to be, and and especially, just like you said, it's disability. We all are going to have a period of time when we're disabled, and who's going to step in and take
Right.
over those financial needs for you and make
Yeah.
medical decisions for you, and who are the backup people going
Right.
to be?
Yeah.
It's complex.
So any other questions on that before I move on to grief? Anybody?
I just wanted to confirm that when my dad died, our attorney saved us, I think, $30,000 by the way he set things up.
That's great, yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Jeannie. So now this goes to Donahue, and I think this was the last one that she did with Donahue, this interview. It's on YouTube, but somebody asks her, so what are you working on next? And then she says, I'm not writing, and I'm very sad. This is after her husband, Frank O'Connor, passed away. And this is just kind of, I think this kind of paints a picture for her and what she went through in the context of objectivism. But, you know, she lost her top value as she talked about him. And then she says something kind of strange. She says, I'm not too interested in anything else. That, to me, is key. And we'll get into that in just a second, but she's giving herself permission not to push herself. It's a little clue. And she will survive it because she loves the world and so on and so forth. Well, this was a couple years before she passed away. So let's start with, actually, let me go back. Who feels a little awkward sometimes when you have a friend or a coworker who is grieving? You don't exactly know what to say to them. Yeah, it's so what I suggest is acknowledge your awkwardness to yourself and give yourself permission to be awkward, because the worst thing that you can say, if you care about the person, you know, the worst thing you can say to them is
Nothing.
exactly. Thank you. So you can say, I'm so sorry for your loss. You can talk to me whenever you want. I don't know what to say. Do you want to talk about it? You know, if they don't want to talk, you can hang around them. You know what? Go out for coffee and talk about the weather. Talk about Iran. Talk about whatever it is. And help them feel a sense of normalcy in their lives. And that's always a wonderful thing. You can say, you know, can I stop by, you know, tomorrow? Can I stop by next month? Can I stop by, you know, you initiate it. The thing that often is said is, let me know if you need any help. That's a dead end. Dead end, no pun intended. And, you know, acknowledge to them and to yourself that grief doesn't have an expiration date. I know that sounds terrible and like, oh, dang it, you know. Sometimes I get angry, like after my mom died, I'm like, I can't say, why does this keep coming up in my mind? I'm like, I'm crazy. No, I wasn't crazy. People who go through that kind of grief are not nuts. Grief is something that's interesting that, oh, here's a funny thing here. I hate funerals. I never know what to say. Just say, I'm sorry for your loss and move on. I'm sorry for your loss. Move on. Yeah. Or they'll say things like, well, the silver lining is blah, blah, blah. At least he didn't, you know, or whatever. Or at least, you know. Don't start saying those sorts of things with the word at least.
The other thing people tend to do is they start sharing what they happen to them.
Yes.
And the person doesn't want to hear about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know how you feel. My cat died. Sorry, your mom died. and that's actually, you know, but the thing is, that is awkward to do it, and it's okay. You don't have to feel And so, thoughts on grief. I've got a couple books that I'll pass around. How to go on living when someone you love dies. This is actually very specific. When your mom dies, there's a chapter. When your dad dies, there's a chapter. When your aunt dies, there's a chapter. When your good friend dies, so on and so forth. So this is a really good one. And I'm just getting into this one, but it's highly recommended by Caitlin Doty. It's okay that you're not okay. So there you are. It's okay. So this is my definition of grieving. And this is I kind of induced this. It's integration. It's integrating that person's loss or not being there. And you need to learn how to process life without, what sometimes it feels like your right arm is gone. Sometimes it feels you've got like this ball of stuff in your chest that is unraveling itself too slowly. And you've got something in the pit of your stomach that just won't go away. Those are the emotional things for grieving, but it is integration, it is conceptual, and it's something that you can't repress. This is a good one here. Grief waits. Always remember that. Grief waits. It's going to get you if you don't acknowledge it. It's going to pounce on you when you least expect it. So go to it first. I like this. The only way out is through. So get right into it. Allow yourself to go dark. Tell your friends you're not yourself. I've done this, by the way, just recently. And give yourself that permission. Be gentle with yourself in this situation. When and if you're ready, invite your loved one back into your life. And this can be a very difficult one, especially if, say, your mom died and you hated her guts. Or you hated her for some specific reason. Or your dad died and you're just angry. You just, so eventually you might want to consider thinking about the fact that they had a life before you were born, if they're your parents. Thinking about the fact that they were people like anybody else, especially if they're your parents. And you can. It also helps. I got this one. Think of your loved one as whole. I got this from a lovely religious Baptist lady, my counselor for a while, and she was like, try to think about your mom as being whole, spiritually, physically, intellectually, and talk to her. And I'm like, oh, no. That's my first reaction, because I thought to myself, if I think about her, if I talk to her, if I have a conversation with her in my head, it's just going to bring me down and make me crumble, and I'll cry for days. Well, that didn't happen. It might for some, but for me, I was finally ready for it after about 8 years. And of course, don't give yourself a deadline. And, a man's got to know his limitations. My favorite line from Dirty Harry. Reach out. Get some counseling, talk to people. And you know what? Talking to a counselor or a psychiatrist or psychotherapist or whatever, you're talking with somebody neutral. That's all you're doing. You're just talking with somebody who doesn't know you, who has some expertise, who has some good advice, who knows the patterns, who might be able to give you some shortcuts. Doesn't mean you're crazy. So, any questions so far?
Hospice
Yes.
groups, at least
Yes.
in Colorado, it's not just about the death. Then there's a year of bereavement counseling that they offer.
Yes.
And that can
And
be,
I've done that.
that can be
Those
good.
are usually, at least the one that I went to is a group therapy. And then other people talk about their, how their dead loved ones died and things like that. Yeah. So, of course, Ashley Brilliant quote, my second favorite philosopher. Dying is a part of living, but only a very small part. But even if it is a small part, it's still part of living. So, my next slide. So basically, you don't want to I don't want you to come away with this with, oh my gosh, how am I going to die? How am I going to go? Oh, such anxiety. You don't want to live that way. You don't want to think about death more than you need to. And you don't want to think about the worst possible way to die. But for me, if I had to choose, I would choose being crushed by bunnies. That's what I would want. And then cremated. So, I have a random image of a cute bunny wearing a tiara, just to kind of calm it down and everything. Breathe, everybody. And tiaras. All right. So you can visit Ayn Rand and her husband Frank at Kenesco Valhalla Cemetery. Yeah. Kensico. Not Kenesco, Kensico, thank you.
Was it bodies or ashes?
Bodies. Yes, she was buried. I believe she was embalmed. During her funeral, I think, I don't know, what, thousands of people showed up for her funeral or something? And so it was this big viewing line. And, that was the first time some people got to actually talk to Ayn Rand. Was there. So she was very much well loved. But in all of this death stuff, I think to myself, because this is the thing, is that we all want to think about, of course our children, we hope that they kind of take our life lessons and our personalities into the future, kind of as an extension of ourselves. Or we write something, or we paint something, or do something artistic, and that's going to kind of like bring us out into the world after we're no longer here, and keep us there, and keep us in people's memories. But I like this. Whatever I do in life, if I don't achieve X, Y, Z, if I don't do all of my bucket list, I always think of Howard Rourke saying, Peter, it's the doing. It's the living, it's the actual process of life. And that life is an end in itself. And that may just be my kind of Zen approach to things. But every moment of my life I live it, and I'm just so happy. I have all 5 of my senses. I can see colors, I can hear sounds, I can enjoy so much. And, it's all right. And even if we do still worry about what lies in between birth and death. But I wanted to end now, perfectly on time, oh my gosh, with copying Mark and Lauren here. I shall now mention integrity. Integrity, as you put it, and you, as a way to love and cherish your loved ones, to cherish and be happy with your values. And in this idea with death and planning your death, it is an extension of your love for your loved ones when you do that work now when you're still alive. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you so very much. Was it life-affirming?
Yes.
And it was about that.
Any questions?
You killed it.
You killed it to death.
You killed it.
On the Build to Death sign, there was the TV thing in the top corner that said live.
Oh, right.
That does make it easy, yes.
You know, Amy, I wondered if you had any thoughts about coming up with a good ritual for
Yeah.
people who are atheists or
Yeah.
atheists, objectivists specifically.
That's a wonderful question. You know, of course, there is the celebration of life and the things that people do. You know, the photo boards and all of this stuff. Or just going up to the podium and in the eulogy, kind of talking about why you loved your loved one, how they affected you, why you were so grateful to them. But I think, and I'll get to your question after I say this. What's most important is not to save that information at the eulogy, but to tell them now. Tell people who you like, who you love, what you like about them, why you care about them, what gets you excited about them, and how they bring the best out of you. Tell them that now. But in terms of, I mean, you can do just about anything if you want, you know, you can get together with the same people that were at the funeral or your loved ones or your friends a month afterwards. You can, alone, you know, if you're talking to yourself, you can talk to them. You can actually talk to your loved one in your mind, as it were. But in terms of, I don't know, does anybody have any ideas for rituals at a funeral or a memorial or a celebration of life?
Here's the reason I ask,
Yeah.
is I think that, I mean, one of the reasons why a lot of people go to church is not that they're that religious, but
Yeah.
they love the community aspect of it.
Yeah.
And that's something that you're cultivating here.
Mhm.
And that's something that has not been, in my opinion, sufficiently cultivated among objectivists.
Yeah, I
You know, we have a really rich community experience where you're doing lots of things together, you celebrate life together, and you have different events and rituals that you can do together. And so that's why I was wondering, since you have done a lot of thought about how to do good community,
Yeah.
I just wondered, yeah.
You know, there's a concept in, oh, by the way, this is another Caitlin Doty book called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, about her time working in a crematorium. It's great. Very fun. A lot of gallows humor, all right? And, but for instance, when she worked in a crematory, there were usually people of Asian descent would witness the cremation, which means basically putting their loved one into the oven or the crematory, that's what it's called. And then they close the door. They don't actually watch their loved one, you know, or anything like that, or peek inside the door or anything. But they light a candle, they have some words, they have a nice memorial, and you can do that. You know, I don't know if it's every crematorium you can do that, but that's something that is done. You can have a green burial if you want that. If you don't want your loved one completely soaked in formaldehyde before they die, which I used to think embalming was pretty cool, but then I learned it's really not great. But yeah, so yeah, there are certain things you can make your own rituals, but that's a really good question, and you know, other than commemorating their life in some way.
Have you heard that Disney World has a hard time keeping people out to scattering their
Yeah.
ashes there?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. The happiest place in the world. I want Aunt Sally to be. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, you can put remains. You know, put it into the Detroit River. You can do all sorts of things. It's not hazardous.
Is that actually legal though? Like spreading
Yeah.
ashes and
Well, I would double check, but in a lot of places it is legal, huh?
But who cares anyway?
Right.
I guess the Catholic Church didn't approve of some, there was some document that came out clarifying where, like, they want the ashes to be buried in a grave site, and they said people were loading them into shotgun shells or something. Really hilarious to me, but.
You can take your loved one's remains and shoot it into orbit. You can,
Pressed into
all
diamonds.
sorts of stuff. Like I said, you know, you can jewels out of them. You can, you know, you can separate the cremains and put some in the little locket you wear. You can do all sorts of things.
Maybe a Viking death.
You know, Viking deaths are, that's with the,
Ship.
the fire.
With the boat.
Now, you know, funeral hires, there is only one legal natural funeral hire, and I think it's in Colorado. Everywhere else in America, you're not allowed to do that. Not open air, because reasons.
Iceland, go to Iceland.
Yes.
So,
No, you can go to India.
I have a confession, and if you have the patience for it, a short story.
Well, we're kind of coming up to
Okay.
Andrews here, but.
Oh, that's all right, Andrew won't mind. But I'll make it real short, but it did take me 15 years to finish closing my mother's estate.
Yes, 15 years, really.
And,
Ugh.
yeah, I haven't told Gina about this. And so I appreciated some of your advice here. So the guy's been traveling and he calls his brother at home, says, "What's new?" So his brother says, "Well, your cat died." He says, "Geez, did you have to like just blurt it out like that? Couldn't you, you know, a little gently?" He says, "What do you mean?" "Well, you know, tell me, you know, the cat was on the roof and he fell, but then he was okay, but then he ran into the street and there was this car and it, yeah." He says, all right, is there anything else?" He says, "Yeah, well, Mom was up on the roof."
Exactly.
You're
yes.
right, I didn't mind.
That's actually, by the way, that same story, I believe, is told in a movie right now. That's, I think it might still be on theaters, called The Farewell. It's a Chinese-made subtitle movie.
Oh.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I did.
Is it good?
I would say that you can interpret it bad or good depending on what your perspective is.
So bad.
Spoken like a lawyer.
Spoken like a lawyer.
No, seriously, it's kind of a mixed case because, anyway, I won't spoil anything.
Do you believe the end of your life is the right time for the ultimate in pragmatism?
Oh.
You'll enjoy the film.
And before we get on to Andrew, I'll pass this around to, this is the folder for my dad's probate. Isn't this organized,
Wow.
everybody? Look how lovely this is.
How much of that would you have to do if it was planning ahead?
Nobody wants to touch my dad's probate folder. I'll put it right here.
Amy,
Yes.
how much of that would exist if your recommendations were followed ahead of time?
Nothing. I mean, maybe,
Ah.
I would have the death certificates in there, you know, but, and maybe some other paperwork and things like that. The biggest part, actually, I skipped over this. Even if you're not going to probate, you need to contact every single business that your loved one had anything to do with if they're sending you a bill. And so then you fax them the death certificate. I think I did like 100 of these, and some of them a few times, because like for instance, a Comcast, they wanted me to travel to some dingy Detroit office in a terrible neighborhood and hand them over an actual copy. It was, and then they still sent me a bill after.
You can't get rid of Comcast.
You assume
No, but-
the death taxes and Comcast.
But with people doing things, so much stuff online these days, in the past, if you wanted to find out who the creditors were in the bills, you would just go to the mailbox. Well, now that's why it's so important that people have your passwords and
Yes.
have a list of a list of your bills and the creditors and those kinds of things, so that, again, it's
Yeah.
about the people that you're leaving. So that there's now, you just have to really have more information about what their online life was like to be able to even affect the changes you're
Yeah, and
talking
that
about.
workbook, I'm Dead Now What, that I was passing around, that has a,
Yes,
so you have to, well, you can get like an iPassword or a,
Yeah.
consolidated password, put that in there, everything will be in there. So that's what I would recommend
But
for
you have to
that.
have confidence that business is gonna stay in business.
Yeah,
Don't
that's
have
true.
that anxiety.
But, yeah, no. So anyway, hope that made it a lot simpler for you, everybody.
Last call in sandwiches.
And let's do Andrew's talk
All right, you can have your
at 2:40.
Take my eyeball.
Another thing to say.
Very good.
Yes, let's,
Yeah. I wear a few hats though. What do you do? Okay. Voting and. Yeah. So what's your other? Have a nice trip. Well, I have a bar and a construction company and I do several. Little smorgasbord. Are you local or?
Yeah, and likewise. We lose that.
I didn't go at all this year. Yeah, I will see. Well, you mean I'm a lot of people who went obviously came under 2 months. You know, obviously. Yeah, I didn't next year.
Mark said 10:40.
I got to bring away some Saturday evening.
I like your shirt. I think it goes good.
You got something important to say, put it on.
Yeah. Talk, Andrew. That's so fun. Yeah, I was wearing my deathly hallows and that was fun.
In black.
Yes, in black.
Yeah, I saw you reading your
I usually wear black anyways.
That was great talk.
Thank you.
It was.
Thanks. That was difficult, Cynthia.
Let's get this away.
I saw those cards.
I'm ready for a.
Thank you.
I gotta actually make a run.
I did.
Anything that is like strangulation, sharp, or suffocate, like plastic bags.
Actually, I really,
Very, very
I'm so happy I did this. I feel really empowered.
How about her photo? Let's find
in
her plastic
areas
photo.
now. And I feel
It's all in liquor, it's just that because they buy, economies of scale and all that, they can sell it.
Well, actually, laws.
There's a floor.
So the state government dictates the price of liquor. So you can't sell it, at least it needs that cost. Because really, the state, you have to, everybody buys the liquor in the state of Michigan.
yeah, I just
Yeah, very,
I
about 7
hope
miles.
that